Hello again, everybody. All right, we're going to have a little fun here today. Everybody watching this right now, every one of you, you're really good at something. You have some talent or you have some ability where, if you're really honest, you're kind of a big deal. You're better at it than anybody else you know. And maybe you've even parlayed this into a successful career. You may have just been born with it. It's some innate ability. We all have something like that. Now, if we are being honest with ourselves, we go to the other side of the spectrum here. And we are really bad at something. We don't know why. I guess when they were handing out this particular talent, you weren't invited to stand in line that day. You were AWOL or something. Everybody you know is better than you at this particular bit of ability or talent. All right. So to set this up, I'm going to start with me. And I am going to talk about one thing that I think I'm pretty good at. I guess maybe I was born with it. Hold on, we're going to come to that because that's really the main theme of today's podcast, and it does relate to being a successful investor, all right? We're going to work through that a little bit, and even if you weren't necessarily born with this, you can still apply it, all right? But before I pat myself on the back, we need to go to the other side, and this is a little painful, and dare I say, is a man a bit emasculating because I am not a Mr. Fix-It. I admit it. I can't fix anything. I can't repair anything. I can't build anything. If you literally just gave me a hammer right now, and I'm barely exaggerating here, I'd say, what end do I use here? I can't do anything with my hands. Let me give you one example. Just one of many. And it started early on. I mean, right away after my wife and I got married. We move into our first apartment. And my lovely wife says, okay, Dave, see the washer and dryer here? Can you just put up a wire rack right above it? We can put our laundry detergent up there. We can put our towels. I said, hey, no problem. Like, okay. So I go to the local hardware store. I get this basic wire rack. It's got little screws in it. And I go back to the apartment. I did get permission, by the way, from the apartment managers who said, yeah, if you pay for it, knock yourself out. It might actually be an improvement. So I go up there and I'm eyeballing it and I'm getting the rack set up and I get these little thingamabob screw things in plastic casing. I've never seen them before. It came with the rack and I put them in and I think I do a great job. And I sit back. Uh-oh. It's like this. I guess I didn't even know there was such a thing as a level. Yeah, I just eyeballed it, and it was crooked. So before I could get my wife back in, I thought, I'll fix this. I take my screwdriver, and I start to pull those thingamabobs out. My friends, I had never heard of a drywall anchor. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know when you put these things in, and they go in, and after they're in the drywall, they expand. Now, most of you, maybe all of you know this. At age 26, I had never heard of such an animal. So I'm pulling these things out, and of course, and I'm somewhat exaggerating here, but they are now creating a much bigger hole than when they went in. They're also pulling out chunks of drywall. Somehow I was able to repair it. I don't even remember how. I may have even asked a neighbor friend to do it for me. We got to keep our deposit, but it was a disaster. One of many, 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 until my wife finally said years into the marriage, you are no longer allowed to try to fix anything because you are a disaster. Okay, now that I have made complete fun of myself, can I at least pat myself on the back with one thing that I'm decent at? Now, it's more subjective. It's hard to quantify. And I don't even know if I was actually born with this or it developed as a young child. But I have a pretty good ability to read the room, take its temperature, pick up on a vibe, read people. And I'm pretty sure if I do some self-examination here, I think it probably began when I was very, very young, even as a toddler. Without going into a lot of details, there were some unpleasant things that were occurring back in those early days, and it was more out of self-preservation that I had to really be careful in what I was watching, looking at, knowing when to leave the room. And so it's kind of a natural ability that I have to pick up on this. Even at my age in my 60s, the first thing I do is when I walk into a room with a bunch of people, I'll start looking at everybody and reading the room, pick up on little verbal and nonverbal cues. And I started to find myself using that ability when I got into this business, both at a granular level when I was dealing with clients, picking up on little nonverbal cues like, oh, out of my peripheral vision, seeing the spouse just kind of fidgeted when I mentioned something or the spouse said something. I'm going to come back to that is what I would start to think. But then a 30,000-foot view, more than just in my office, reading the room and how a collective of investors was behaving, how Wall Street was behaving. That served this team very, very well as we got to the peak of the bubble back in 99 and 2000. We were just not building any major positions in those tech stocks at the time. There was too much greed, unlike anything I've ever seen, even to this day. And that gets me to where we are today. Reading the room. This room compared to that room back 25 years ago. Completely different environments, completely different temperatures. Let me explain a little bit. Back then, the proverbial little old ladies selling CDs who had never even gone into the stock market before, now buying some of these newfangled .com stocks. We saw that again in the housing bubble with these no-income loans. It was madness. Now we fast forward to today and this thing called artificial intelligence or AI. Folks, it is the real thing. I think you know about it. Now, is there a lot of hype? Yeah. Is there a lot of enthusiasm and, dare I say, greed coming into the market a little bit? Double and triple, yeah. But not compared to what we saw in 99 and 2000. Not yet. I'm going to come back to that. But back then, you had a lot of newfangled companies coming to the markets, to the public markets, with no chance of making any money. And yet they were bringing in lots of institutional backers and even some retail investors eventually. Today, you don't see nearly that kind of unbridled greed and enthusiasm. A lot of your big players now are tech companies that have been around forever. How about the poster child of AI right now is Nvidia? Now, this is not a buy, sell, or hold recommendation. These are just the facts. This is the news of the day. Most of you know about Nvidia. That's not some newer company, even though they've just become more well-known in recent years, but they formed back in 1993. Jensen Huang, who's become a little bit of a household name, Jensen Huang was making chips for games, for gamers. That's how he started. He knows the business, and he came a little bit late in terms of becoming well-known, but starting this nascent AI industry. Oracle, Larry Ellison, his son David Ellison, they've been around for decades and decades, and now they're a major player. Nvidia now is making so much money, they hardly know what to do with it. They've been buying back a lot of their stock, even at record prices. You don't see that very often. It's like, what else should we do with it? Well, they've been teaming up with companies like Oracle and others to develop something like the Stargate project. We don't have a lot of time to go into that right now. You can certainly Google it. You can search it, but it's an amazing, unbelievable project that's going to be in several different states, sort of starting in Texas, but then fanning out to some other areas. $500 billion is expected to be spent on this. So, my friends, this is the real deal, just like the internet was, but we are not at bubble territory at this point. Not today. Now, for those of you who get my commentary, I have been practically begging, please send us some kind of a correction, an overdue pullback to get some of the froth that's starting to build in some of these high-tech, high-growth tech companies. And if we can do that kind of 3 steps up, 1 step back, 2 steps up, half step back, if that's what we can do, we can avoid the bubblicious environment that was created in the late 90s into 2000. If not, here is the issue. Here's the problem. If it's 12 steps up and a quarter step back, 18 steps up and a half step back. I'm going to be on this podcast and I'm going to be writing commentaries and say, I now have one leg on that bubble bandwagon. Now, it may not be for another year or two. I know how to read the room. I can tell when now the enthusiasm and the greed is so disconnected to the realities on what we're seeing in front of us that I think I'll have a pretty good indication that maybe it's time to start pulling back on some of that. And I'll leave you with this. It's kind of the plan of action, all right? If you are a long-term investor and you have a tolerance for risk, as most long-term investors should have, you've got to have some exposure to this industry that we know as artificial intelligence. Now, I can't tell you what stocks to buy. That's going to be up to you and your advisor. And maybe most of you should not even be trying to pick individual stocks in this area. Perhaps a mutual fund or an ETF. Talk to your advisor about that. Even if you have not the highest degree of risk tolerance, but you still have money invested in the stock market, if you think long term, a portion, I'm telling you, should be in this area into technology. In 2 weeks, come back on this podcast. In 2 weeks, I'm going to kind of angle off this a little bit and talk about the fact that none of us, we don't have enough imagination to know what this world is going to look like because of AI 5, 10, 20, 50 years from now. But if you want to profit from it, you do need to have some exposure to it. Again, talk to your advisor about that. So, as of today, as I'm recording this, and for a while, in my opinion, there's no bubble as I read the room and compare it to everybody getting scared about 99 and 2000. As long as we can have some necessary pullbacks along the way. I hope we do, because the last thing I would like to do is come back on the Simon Says podcast a year from now and go, oh my goodness, it's 99. Let's not do that, all right? Folks, thanks for joining me. Again, 2 weeks from now, I'll be talking about this, about not having enough imagination. In between, you'll really want to come back here next week. Why? For the first time ever, my long-term partner, Tom Cordes, is going to be here, sitting right next to me. And we're going to talk about what we've learned together over the past 26 years. You don't want to miss that. All right, hit subscribe if you haven't done so already, and we'll talk to you next week.